In the void beyond time, where thoughts shape form and consciousness predates creation, something stirred. The Beyonder, ancient even before the multiverse began to sprawl its boundless branches, was a concept before concepts, a thought beyond thoughts. He existed outside the Marvel multiverse, beyond eternity's breath and the tribunal's decree, observing a reality he neither belonged to nor was confined by. When he first peered into the latticework of creation, he saw chaos wearing the mask of order and order trembling at the prospect of free will. It was fascination at first, then curiosity, then a subtle, aching hunger, not for power, but for meaning. When he entered the multiverse, his mere presence warped it. Universes, bent in submission, abstracts, death, eternity, oblivion, recoiled like ripples fleeing the center of an explosion. The living tribunal, normally resolute and unshaken, watched cautiously. There was no equation that could quantify Beyonder's presence. He was not bound to the laws of this construct. He was the unbound, and yet there were those who believed themselves architects of reality. The Celestials. Majestic, ancient, and impossibly powerful, the Celestials had wandered the galaxies since the first photons scattered across the vacuum. Beings of immense cosmic magnitude, they crafted life, culled it, and seeded evolution like divine gardeners with unfathomable blueprints. They molded entire species, sculpted stars as art, judged civilizations with a nod or silence, and stood tall even before gods were born in the minds of mortals. They saw themselves not as kings, but as cosmic functions, imperatives born of necessity. The first firmament had once elevated them as its emissaries. They believed their mission sacred. They were not used to being questioned. But then came the anomaly. At first, they did not understand the Beyonder. He wasn't like Galactus, whom they could gauge, nor was he like the Phoenix Force, which they once attempted to study. He was not part of the ecosystem. He was not part of the divine machinery they upheld. He was foreign, undefined, an existential threat to everything they had measured. And worse, he did not kneel. The first interaction wasn't even violent, it was worse. He arrived in silence within the Arishem cluster, where the judgment of 1,000 civilizations was being finalized. The Celestials gathered vast and incomprehensible to even fourth-dimensional beings. Their bodies towered over suns, their armor shimmered with pre-matter inscriptions. Arishem the judge turned his burning gaze toward the Beyonder, who floated like an idle star, untouched by the gravity of their combined will. "You are anomalous," Arishem spoke, a voice that cracked the crust of dead planets in neighboring systems. "I am curiosity," the Beyonder answered, "and I am disappointed." Exitar the Exterminator shifted. Tiamut, the dreaming celestial, hummed with dormant fury. Even the one above all celestial, rarely seen outside the hidden convergence, leaned forward. "You trespass on sacred judgment." "Withdraw," Arishem declared. The Beyonder smiled, not with contempt, but with the faintest ache of loneliness. "I have watched you," he said, his voice as soft as the space between heartbeats. "You shape reality like a child crafts clay figures. You think yourselves divine, but divinity unchallenged is not proof of truth. It is merely stagnation with a crown." "Order must be maintained," Arishem replied. "Order," Beyonder echoed, "is a leash pretending to be a spine." In that moment, the philosophical chasm between them became clear. The Celestials believed in structure, evolution, destiny. They did not care for moral questions. They judged life like a gardener trims hedges, efficient, final, impersonal. They believed in their function. The Beyonder, by contrast, had no function. He was a question in the form of a being, a question that shattered assumptions. He asked, "Why?" Why must evolution be measured? Why must potential be judged? Why must freedom be tempered by external decree? The Celestials had no answers. They had mandates, blueprints, prime directives etched into the fabric of existence. But the Beyonder had seen beyond mandates. He had seen what lay outside the system. He knew that the multiverse was not the end, but a fraction of a greater. Enigma, you are an error, Nezar the calculator stated, an anomaly that must be corrected. The Beyonder chuckled, not mocking but melancholic. If I am an error, he said, then perhaps truth is afraid to evolve. It was not a battle of power yet. It was a battle of ideology. To the Celestials, the Beyonder was chaos incarnate, unmeasured, limitless, unpredictable. Their very identities were rooted in control, classification, and judgment. To let the Beyonder roam free was to admit that there were questions they could not answer, possibilities they could not control. To the Beyonder, the Celestials were tragic, grand, yes, monumental, certainly, but tragically blind. They had mistaken obedience to function for wisdom. They had mistaken survival for enlightenment. He saw in them the same flaw he saw in the tribunal, in the cosmic abstracts, even in death herself. The fear of irrelevance, the fear that there was something more beyond their dominion. And so, the Celestials made their decision. The summoning began. Across dimensions, they called their full host. Every Celestial awakened. Even the dreaming ones, even the rebellious ones. Arishem, Exitar, Tiamut, Skathan, Ziran, Jemiah, Eson, the one above all. Celestial emerged from the inner paradox where time folds into thought, the full might of the Celestials, countless beyond numbers. Reality trembled, and the Beyonder watched it all like a man watching dominoes being arranged in a neat line. Not with fear, with a sorrow that the dominoes didn't know they were just waiting to fall. Very well, the Beyonder said. Let us test your judgment. Let us see if structure can hold against the weight of the unknown. And the cosmos held its breath. The fabric of existence strained, not because the Beyonder prepared for war, but because reality feared the answer to his question. The battle was not merely going to be of fists or energy or godly strikes. It was going to be metaphysical, a war between defined function and undefined existence, between the limitless and the limiting, between those who believed they had shaped truth and the one who had seen the truth unshaped. And the battle was about to begin. The multiverse shuddered, not because stars were dying or time was fraying, but because something was about to happen that had no precedent, no record in the codices of the living tribunal, no echo in the halls of eternity, no whisper even in the cryptic warnings of the Watchers. The full host of the Celestials had converged, a sight not seen since the First War, when the universe was young and the firmament still murmured. They stood tall, each one larger than galaxies, their forms a mix of blinding plasma, exotic matter and cosmic armor, inscribed with the language of creation itself. Arishem towered at the forefront, silent and motionless, his judgment already cast. Around him orbited thousands of Celestials, some radiant, some terrible, all impossibly old and terrifyingly resolute. And in the void between them stood the Beyonder. He looked small, out of place, a man in white, no armor, no weapons, no entourage, just an expression of mild interest, as if examining a painting he didn't quite understand yet. Yet for all his humility of form, space itself bent around him like water, around a blade. The Celestials sensed it. He was not within reality, not bound to it. He was a leak from beyond the dam of existence, a thought made manifest from outside the source code of being. They struck first. Exitar, the exterminator, moved. a being capable of eliminating multiversal threats with a gesture. His hand descended. With the force of a collapsing dimension, reality unraveling in a gravitational wave. He had destroyed pantheons with a glance. His blow would have erased not just a world, but the context in which that world existed. But the Beyonder didn't dodge. He simply looked at the blow and it didn't happen. Not that he blocked it. It simply unraveled as an idea, unmade before it became an action. Exitar's hand froze in mid-air, then bent inward. He began to convulse. His armor flickered with panic. Something foreign had entered his consciousness. Not a virus, not a parasite, but a realization. The realization that his will was not his own anymore. The Beyonder raised one hand, and Exitar ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not killed. He simply was removed from the concept of existing. The space he had occupied folded shut like a book being closed. The host reeled. Panic rippled across minds that had never known fear. But they surged forward. Tiamut, Ziran, Nezar, Skathan, Oneg, all unleashed energies that couldn't be comprehended, let alone resisted. Multiversal fire, entropy waves, antimatter floods, time loops weaponized into spears. Each was a weaponization of cosmic logic. Their power would have ended the Council of Gods in an instant. Dimensions cracked, time inverted, laws broke down. The Beyonder sighed. He raised his other hand and unwrote the concept of power in the area around him. Suddenly, their attacks didn't mean anything. They hit, but there was no effect. Not because he shielded himself, but because he removed meaning from the attack itself. Like a punch thrown in a dream, the Celestials, undeterred, began to adapt. They reshaped themselves. Tiamut turned into a living idea, a mimetic weapon meant to rewrite the Beyonder's perception of reality. Nezar the Calculator attempted to trap him in a self-contained logic loop, a pocket thought experiment in which the Beyonder would have to question his own nature until collapse. The Beyonder allowed it. He entered the construct. Time stilled. Within this psychic prison, Nezar confronted him. "You claim to be truth," Nezar intoned, "but you do not adhere to logic. You are an inconsistency." The Beyonder looked around. "So you built a cage out of reason. Interesting. You cannot be outside the system and influence it. That is contradiction, and contradiction leads to collapse." The Beyonder smiled. "Only if the system is all there is." And then he did the unthinkable. He took Nezar's logic, his very thought patterns, and reversed them. The prison shattered, not because it was broken, but because it was now self-negating. The formula collapsed inward, and Nezar screamed, a thought being unmade by a superior idea. Back in the physical realm, Nezar fell, a celestial mind, undone by its own equation. The rest attacked in desperation. Oneg wielded the anti-Genesis flame, a primordial energy from before time. Skathan invoked the final judgment, a power that even the living tribunal had once deferred to. The one above all celestial, cloaked in the unseen frequency of divine command, stepped forward, preparing to collapse the layers of reality and trap. The Beyonder in pre-existence. The Beyonder waited, and then he spoke, not with sound but with truth. "You were made to judge," he said. "You were created with purpose, but that purpose defines you. Chains, even golden ones, are still chains. You call me chaos, but you fear me not because I bring destruction, but because I bring freedom." Reality slowed. The Celestials trembled, not because of the words, but because those words rippled through the framework of their code. The Beyonder wasn't attacking anymore. He was reprogramming them by exposing them to concepts they were never meant to comprehend. "You are not gods," he said. "You are tools. Beautiful, ancient, and complex, but tools nonetheless." Thida fought back, but now their blows were slower. Weaker, they were beginning to question, and that was the final blow. Because a being of infinite purpose cannot survive doubt. The Beyonder reached out and touched the one above all celestial, not violently but gently, with compassion. "Would you like to see beyond the wall?" he asked, and he showed them. In a single moment, every celestial saw what the Beyonder saw, the full truth, the beyond realm, the larger system, the realization that the multiverse was not the ceiling of existence, but merely a box within a greater unknown. They saw their own coding, their own inception, their own creators, and the limits they had always believed infinite. It broke them. One by one, the Celestials fell, not in defeat, but in understanding. They did not die, they did not scream, they simply became still, as if a wind that had, once blown for eons, finally rested. The host was silent. The battle was over. The Beyonder stood alone, not with triumph, but with quiet melancholy. He had not destroyed them. He had freed them, not from chains of steel, but from chains of perception. That day, the Celestials learned a truth deeper than judgment. That power without self-awareness is limitation. That purpose, once absolute, can become prison. And that a being who exists outside of reason, outside of control, outside of definition, cannot be beaten by force, because he is not a force. He is a question, and he won because he made gods question themselves. And that, in the end, is the one thing they were never prepared to do.